Hey everyone, back in the paddock tonight, and what a Friday it's been, quite an eventful one. Let's take it from the top. McLaren declining to use what we've termed the Macarena wing in practice. Rumours that Red Bull chief engineer Paul Monaghan is to leave Red Bull for Cadillac, and there's going to be an exhaust wing ban from 2027. Oh, and there's been some practice going on. So let's take it from the top. Yes. This weekend, McLaren were going to trial their version of Ferrari's so-called Macarena wing. We wanted to call it the rotisserie wing, but Fred Vasseur, team principal of Ferrari, was determined that it should be called the Macarena wing. Red Bull, of course, have brought out a similar device that they sort of were developing in parallel with Ferrari, but it was Ferrari that had it first. That's what caught McLaren's eye at the beginning of the year. And obviously lead times are such with items like that there's naturally a lag. We had an April without racing, so McLaren have been working on that. They decided not to run it, and technical director Neil Huldy explained that once they'd got it in the garage, they were ready to sign it off, they fitted it to the car, they weren't actually confident that the new device would work as effectively as it would be in terms of the mechanism that actuates it. And there's a lot of moving parts going on, not just in a rear wing actuator, but in terms of practice for a Grand Prix weekend. Track time really is at a premium, even when you've got 2 practice sessions on Friday rather than one of a sprint weekend. So they decided they didn't want to lose any track time. It was supposed to be on Lando Norris's car, and well, Alanis Morissette would probably find it ironic. In actual fact, it's probably a slightly humorous and unfortunate coincidence that hydraulic problems then kept Lando in the garage for the first 45 minutes of practice this morning. So a little bit of disappointment for them. Also, we're not likely to see that wing in Silverstone because it's a sprint weekend, so it's very much back to the lab. We'll maybe see it in Belgium. So yes, the rumours, Paul Monaghan to leave Red Bull Racing for Cadillac. Now, Paul Monaghan is pretty much a Red Bull lifer. He's been there since 2005. Before then, he worked for Renault. He was race engineer for Jenson Button and Fernando Alonso. So a long history there. There's been a bit of an exodus from Red Bull in the past couple of years, and people are starting to detect a pattern that it's kind of like the Ravens leaving the Tower of London. It's still a rumour as yet. Neither Red Bull nor Cadillac are confirming that it's happening on the record, but people we've spoken to here are saying that it is going to happen. And something that was very palpable today was that usually after practice on a Friday, there's a team representative sent out to do the pen interviews with the media afterwards. And normally that is Paul Monaghan. Today it was Pierre Vacher, the technical director of Red Bull. So maybe they're just not wanting to put him up in front of any questioning. Team principal Laurent Mekies had quite a wretched team principal press conference today. There's hardly any questions directed at anyone else. It was all pointed at him. Most of the questions were about the Red Bull engine and the business of the internal combustion engine being deemed the most powerful in Formula One and therefore not qualifying for upgrades under the FIA's Agio schedule. And he had to bat off a lot of questions about Paul Monaghan and in turn where Max Verstappen fits into all that. Because as I said in yesterday's video, Max Verstappen's next move really does unplug a lot of the moving parts in the mechanism of the F1 drivers market. So Laurent Mekies having to do a lot of denial before the cock crows, as it were, for those who remember their Bible studies. Also confirmed is that the so-called exhaust wings, pioneered by Ferrari with a very clever reading of the technical rules at the beginning of this year and copied to the best of their ability by the rest of the grid, they're actually going to be banned from 2027. And it's kind of a separate but related note to the Mercedes diffuser we talked about yesterday, in that it's something that's not easily copied because in Ferrari's case, they shifted the differential so that they could have a much greater sweep of rear wing around the exhaust and stay legal. The FIA wants to close that loophole of development because what they really don't want is for teams to be spending lots of money and finding lots of aerodynamic performance, because the more downforce these cars develop, the harder it is for them to follow each other and overtake, and that's not what they want. Shall we get on to practice? Kimi Antonelli fastest in both sessions, and by quite a margin. This is the interesting thing, not just that he was fastest, but for me, FP2, he found 0.2 of a second between his first and his second push laps on the soft tyre, and that was significant for me, also significant for some of their rivals. Oscar Piastri, in his post-session debrief, said, that's actually really interesting. And George Russell struggled in FP2 in particular. He says McLaren are a real threat this weekend. McLaren say, no, we're not. Well, they would say that, wouldn't they? McLaren say they're best of the rest, but they're still just sort of tellingly those final few tenths off. Behind them, it's a slightly different story. Now, we were expecting Ferrari, with the new engine they've brought under the Agio regulations, to be rather a lot closer than they were. I mean, where are we at? Lewis Hamilton 0.6 off in FP2, Charles Leclerc 0.8 off, not what you would normally expect on a Friday, but of course there's always a bit of kidology going on a Friday, so some people saying, they were a bit slow on Friday in Barcelona, and then look, they won the race. Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur says that's not the case, we really struggled in the heat. Perhaps more tellingly, because he cannot tell a lie, Charles Leclerc said the feeling here is really different from what it was in Barcelona. The struggle is real. So yeah, on to Red Bull. Big package of upgrades added to that car this weekend, but quite a problematic first day of practice for them. Some gearbox issues, hydraulic issues that held up both cars, an engine issue for Isaac Hadjar first thing off, and both of them struggling with what they described as the revs dropping around turn 3. And it was sort of this inexplicable business of as they went round turn 3, which is fairly slow corner here, but also quite crucial to get a good exit, because there's a little short straight that follows, and then a tighter corner at turn 4 where there's an overtaking opportunity. You need a good exit from 3, and they found they were bogging down with the revs unexpectedly. They didn't really offer any explanation for that, but Arvid Lindblad was quite telling in the way he said, well, welcome to my world, that's been happening to us all season, so maybe that's just a performance characteristic that's baked into what, as we all know, is the best internal combustion engine in Formula One. So we'll see how that pans out. It could be a question of altitude. We're not that high up here, but without the MGU-H on the cars this season, there is a telling difference in the turbo performance. And without wishing you to bore you with the details of my daily routine, I tried to go out for a run this morning outside our lovely mountain chalet, and had to call it quits after a couple of miles because I felt like I'd put on 10 kilos overnight. So you do actually feel it when you're walking around, when you're climbing the stairs. So it's probably going to affect engines in a much greater order of magnitude. So not really a surprise to see some of the engines coughing and spluttering a bit in unforeseen ways. So yeah, quite an interesting first day of practice. We'll see how things evolve into tomorrow when I'll speak to you again.